So even though this is a clothing tutorial and how to build a body, you know, it's been 4 days since I've seen Taurus, and I've gotten in the habit of taking pictures with my phone of my progress and then keeping it with me so I can look at it during my breaks or when I'm on the train or whatnot. And in that time, I noticed some areas that were not quite right still, and you know, polishing is never done. So before I proceed to making the rest of the body, I want to make those changes. And it really was the brow and the nose and his eyebrows that, you know, just needed tweaking. And you know, it's never too late to make changes, so I just wanted to have his face the best that I could before I moved on to the body. The eyebrows are still made from that same piece I made the eyelashes and parts of the hair, and it just goes to show you how if you're smart about it, you can keep recycling and recycling, and recycling is going to be a big part of how I build Taurus's body. I'm not advocating for you to do the same. If you've never made a body, please make it from scratch like we did in the previous workshops. But I just finished making male character about a week or two ago, and I just didn't feel the need to start over again, especially since they were similar in type. It was, you know, useful enough to get something out of it. So I'm basically going to be showing also how, if you do have pieces, how you can get creative and, you know, recycle them for somebody else. But not before I make those last minute changes. So you see, it's just parts of the brow still just didn't make me happy. And I'm just filling them in with H polish. Remember, in Alt, you'll fill in those little bumps that you make usually when you're moving things around with Move Topological or the Move tool. So refining those last edges. All those little bumps. Just going after that area right under his nose, I could see it that it was creating a awkward shadow. That's another thing to look out for. If you see any unsightly shadows or lights bouncing off the character's features in an odd way, you again control that to a point. Yes, materials have something to do with that in lighting, but they're only behaving based on what they're up against. So if the topology's not that great, the lighting and the shading are going to react to that. Still not totally happy with these eyebrows. I think sometimes they're a pretty good proof that sometimes you could fuss with something too much and they start looking a bit odd, but I always make the eyebrows in another application anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. As long as it's generally where it should be at, that's all I care about at this point. It's really that part. I mean, there's something to keep in mind when you start adding things, whether it's clothing or eyebrows or whatever. Be mindful of how they're affecting the silhouette. I could tell that his eyebrows are affecting the silhouette from the side view in a negative way, and they're kind of hiding all the work that I did for the nose. So just keep that in mind. I also realized that I forgot to fill in his eyelids, so that's why I kept getting my attention in a weird way. It's because they were still the default white. Just filling out, adjusting those eyelids. And again, after that nose. See, it's never too late to make those changes. Never too late. Just fixing those little cracks. You don't always have to Dynamesh to get rid of cracks. Sometimes you could just fill them in. It's not worth Dynameshing the whole character just for that. It's also worth noting that he's pretty low res Dynamesh. I'm sure you can see. I have not used any subdivisions at all on him. I've probably kept him, knowing myself, he's either a 64 or 128 Dynamesh. That's pretty much as high as I go for this. Try to keep the characters relatively low res in the Dynamesh phase. And I usually only up it 1 or 2 subdivisions if I leave it to hold the texture. And now I'm gonna get ready to start working on the body. Pretty much going after his neck. If you have seen the grandpa characters, you know that a lot of them have very long necks. And Taurus, while he's not as crazy as Mari's, he does have kind of a long neck, so I'm trying to make room for that. And in doing so, I found other spots of the nose that needed corrections. Right here, I was trying to move the eye around, see if I could change his focus, but it's one of those cases where you did something to make a change and you realized it's not as good, so I went back. And now I finally brought in that other body I was telling you about, which belongs to a character of mine called Damien. He's another Z sculpt, work in progress, but his body more or less can be used. He's much thinner than Taurus, and he's stylized in a different, more anime kind of way, but still useful. Especially since he's gonna have clothes, so I don't really need all that detail. But since it was already all laid out there, I mean, I'm just basically using the move topological and a bit of inflate here and there to get the overall size. Again, I'm not free drawing this, free sculpting this. I do have Taurus's references behind this interface, but it looks like when I'm recording through ZBrush, it's not capturing that transparency. So his character sheet is right here. That's how I'm able to see how I can change the body from Damien to Taurus. And you can see Taurus is a much thicker guy than Damien. Just going around seeing what else needs to be corrected of the torso. I'm sure you've noticed that when you're trying to do the torso or things like that, again, hide parts of the body. Get them out of the way so that you can see what you're doing. Damien's legs were ridiculously long, and that's not the case with Taurus. So again, this gizmo tool makes it a lot easier to get it back to size. If you want to move the pivot of the gizmo, you just hold down the Alt and you'll see a little lock open, and then you can guide it to where you want to, or you can snap it to where you want to. It's one of the added bonuses for Damien. I kept his hands separate. I typically like my Z sculpts to have everything separate for this exact reason. I was able to freely scale his hands larger to suit Taurus's needs, and it was easier because since they weren't attached to his hands, his arms, I didn't have to worry about destroying that part of the sculpt. So if you do plan on recycling, parts of your character, keep your sculpts in pieces. If you notice, even the arms are separate. Putting his legs closer together and inflating them, just keep in mind that ZBrush loves to connect things that are too close, so any closer and those legs are going to fuse into one piece. I'm just fixing. I'm sure you've noticed that I haven't gotten rid of the old neck part or the back part of it, because why? I can always Dynamesh them together later, so it's fine. Just filling in some. When I inflated it, looks like I missed a part of his chest, so again, with the H polish and Alt, you can just fill in that gap pretty quickly. There you go. I was looking more like Taurus. And we're just about ready to start making his clothes. Just flattening his feet there. It's pretty normal when you're making characters in ZBrush that the feet will not be straight underneath. So I usually use the the trim selection to flatten it out. Right now I'm just taking advantage of those booleans that ZBrush makes so easily now to create that collar. And I'm recycling it so that I can use it for his cuffs of his jacket. I told you, recycling is going to be a big part of putting this body together. I always try to find similar shapes in the design and see how I can repurpose things so I don't have to keep rebuilding things over and over. Like, this all depends on the character, of course. Some characters you can't do this as much, but some you can do it all over the place if you have a good imagination. I'm gonna just use the jacket. I'm gonna get the jacket out of the torso, and to make an extraction in ZBrush, all you have to do is select the piece you want, mask it, turn into a group by hitting Control W, and then it's just a matter of going in the subtool menu and hitting extract. Be careful about the thickness. Usually their default thickness is not good enough. I usually use a 0.002 or 0.005 for my own. And then I typically ZRemesh it down. I usually go ZRemesh half and I bring it down to a pretty low poly state. It's about the only usefulness I have for ZRemeshing. But I would still probably end up dynameshing it at some point anyways, because I just don't like the topology that ZRemesh creates. It gives me more problems down the road. But it's good enough to at least manipulate with new topological. And again, I'm just focused on the silhouette at this point, so it's not a big deal. So I'm just matching up the jacket to his design. Still has some details of his chest, the original chest, but we're going to get rid of that soon enough. I'm just smoothing it out and filling it in with H polish, being mindful of that silhouette. And the inflate tool again comes in handy to just fill things in. Now he's got his gloves and he's got general sense of his jacket. Now that I have pretty much the jacket, I'm about ready to move on to adjust those cuffs and the jacket, some finishing touches to it, just to bring it down. And now it's about time to make those pants, doing the same process by creating a group, extracting that group, and then painting it the color of his pants. Just adjusting the legs there because I knew by creating that extraction, ZBrush was going to try to connect those legs. Do not want the feet included. Again, I'm going to keep things as separate as I can. Always be mindful to delete the interior of your extractions. You can either tell it not to create one in the first place, but if you accidentally forgot to turn that off, you can just select the pants or whatever item and then holding down shift click on the interior of your item and that'll hide it, and then just go to modify topology in the geometry menu and hit delete. Hidden. Just roughing out the folds of his pants, not being too careful here, just again the general silhouette. I'm being honest, at this point I don't have a reference for jeans. I eventually at some point in this tutorial do cave in and get some, because again you can try to eyeball it the best you can just to see how you're doing, but it's starting to look a bit funky. I decided to go get a reference. Always, always, always have references. If you're like me and don't enjoy looking up references, go get your references when you're not sculpting. Never sculpt and then try to get references. It just kills the mood and you spend more time researching that way. So always keep your research time and your sculpting time separate unless it's an emergency. And just making those folds and then using H polish to kind of harden some edges, because unfortunately he's lost some of the shape of his body because I Z-remeshed these pants and I brought them to a lower state. So some parts that were harder got soft, so you gotta bring them back, and H polish is pretty good with that. Here I'm just modifying one side of the leg. If you're getting into a close area like that and ZBrush keeps fighting, you can just mask the parts that you want to be changed later on. Make your corrections on the visible part, and then inverse the selection, and then go to deformation, smart symmetry, and it'll make both sides the same. I do that for tight spots like butt cheeks or inner thighs, parts that are just getting too close in ZBrush, and ZBrush just kind of screws it up. Made a basic silhouette of his shoes and boots. Typically make my boots or shoes in another application, so for this tutorial, I'm really trying as best as I can to make everything in ZBrush for you guys here. I'm giving you my best shot here. Just roughing it out. It's not so bad. Giving him a once over. Now it's getting ready to start putting those details of the pants. Also Dynamesh his jacket. Pretty much because I have some details that I need to put in, and you know, I could add a bunch of subdivisions with ZBrush, but I think I've made it clear in other workshops and whatnot. I'm not a huge fan of ZBrushing or adding subdivisions at this point. I like to see how far I can get away with just using Dynamesh. Putting some adjustments for the jacket. Still not liking that part up there. Just putting in some of the folds again, roughing it out, not caring too much about its accuracy. I'm just putting it there as a placeholder for the retopology phase. Gonna reuse that color another time to make the bottom part of his jacket. Again, trying to recycle as much as I can. Orbiting all around just to make sure everything fits. Gonna make some of his pockets. This is a really good case. I'm not too happy with these pockets, but I decided to leave this part in the tutorial just to show you that sometimes when you're free modeling and you kind of go like, oh, maybe I'll make them this way. You do it and then you're like, you know, I had to fuss so much for something so simple. This may not be the best way. If I were to go back on this part, I probably would just sculpt this right on top of the jacket. Just, you know, make the mask of it and just kind of sculpt it from there. Really wasn't worth all of this just for that. Might be easier in another application because I could just retopo it right on top of him, but here it was just more of a fuss than anything else. I just never really was happy how it looked. But it's okay, sometimes you try something and it just doesn't work out that best. You just won't do it that way again. Just adding these little pockets and details. I don't really care that it's low poly and that I see some pixelation. They're just more like guidelines for me in retopology. Getting ready to put a zipper. Now it's button time. Trim rectangle made that really easy. You can get the trim rectangle by hitting Shift Control, and you'll get this. Instead of the selection, you can change it to the trim rectangle. I just recommend that after you make your trimming, turn it back to selection, because what will happen is when you go to make your selections, you're gonna actually just end up trimming all over the place. Finding other uses for those buttons in other areas. I used the collar again and then deleted some parts to make that extra pad part right there. So you see, I've recycled that I don't know how many times already. It's just cutting time. I'm using another character of mine, Pixie Koi, to take her zipper and give it to him. Again, I modeled her not too long ago and just didn't feel the need. I know ZBrush has its own default zipper that I could use, but I like to make everything on my own. If I'm going to recycle parts, I'd rather recycle mine. So I made my own zipper from scratch, and even though hers is much shorter, smaller than his, I can still recycle it if I'm creative enough. Again, it's just a general idea. I'm just trying to sell Z-Sculpt here because I don't even think I'd waste the geo on something like this. I probably would just paint this on for the actual final model, but it looks nice to have that little shine going on in there, at least for the sculpt. You see, I'm just duplicating it and reshaping it. I know I constantly talk about the move topological and how it's better than move, but when you have something that's highly detailed and complete, the move brush is actually better than move topological, because move topological would have moved each zipper piece individually, which would have been a huge headache. I needed to move the whole thing as one piece, and the move brush is perfect for that. You can move things, large, highly detailed things, in one shot. And at this point in our model, that's what we need. I don't need individual little things moved around. I need big things just to make some minor changes like this. There, I just deleted those pieces of the jacket bottom to kind of give the illusion that the zipper is separating that. And just shoving in what doesn't work. Gonna go for that zipper bottom one more time, just to fill in that gap there that I ended up with, and then I'll just delete what I don't need. This doesn't really actually have to fit, it just has to look like it fits. Just found the error I want to correct. It's still bugging me. Going around, taking a second shot at those wrinkles. That fold there, not quite right, but I'm not worried about it. The custom brush I'm using for the folds, if you want to make them on your own, you can use either the damp standard and alt, so it adds instead of subs, and you can use pinch to finalize it. And now I'm going to make the belt. I'm not too sure if the belt is going to make it to the final model. Now that I see it in 3D, it doesn't look like you can see much of it. I don't know if it's worth the geo. But to be faithful to the design at this point, I'm just going to include it. It's one of the added benefits of the times you get to model your own characters. You can make these choices pretty quickly if you want to keep or take away something. In the client's case, it's not your choice to make. Fine-tune that belt. Making some adjustments to his pants. It should be noted that with the body and the clothes that I've done here, I have been both roughing it and then quickly polishing as I go. That's typically how I polish. The more comfortable you get with the polishing pass, the more you just kind of do it as you go, so it's not some huge undertaking. For Taurus, I deliberately left it to the last minute so you guys can see the process from start to finish, but typically this is how you work as you go along. You do it as you go, so it cuts a lot of time. If you see a problem, you immediately go and fix it. You just kind of work your way around the whole body until things start polishing off. Again, there I got a little carried away without realizing I wasn't recording, so I'm just doing a quick flash through the history for you to see what I did in those couple minutes that I was off recording. Doing final trim because again I was moving stuff around and that'll cause that same issue. I'm trying to make the shoes planes as obvious as possible to me because I usually make shoes and boots from really low res models, so I really want to make sure that I made it clear where's what because I'm not going to have a lot of topology there to make it happen. Adding some more belt loops. This is when I finally caved in and got a reference and I realized I didn't have them in quite the right place. So again, that's what references are for. Make your corrections and move on. Something about his legs that bothered me. Sometimes when you get carried away making the clothing, the general silhouette got lost and you gotta try to bring it back because he had it before. So I just decided to revert the changes I made. They weren't worth keeping. And that's about it for Taurus. So for the next workshop, you do not need to have a fully completed character with clothes and everything that I showed in the tutorials. I just wanted to get ahead and show you, we just briefly discussed clothing and I showed you a quick way to extract it, but just wanted to show you the process from start to finish of making clothes for a character in case you need it in the future. So if you did not attend the third workshop, don't worry, I did not do this at length like this. This is something that I just added on the base rough that we did, just so everyone has a general idea. So for the fourth workshop, I just need you to bring something that you kind of polished, and then whether it needed clothes or not is irrelevant. You don't have to build me any clothes. We're just going to basically see how we can get our stuff out of ZBrush and into a third application for topology or 3D printing, and just so how flexible and easy ZBrush makes that for us. So I will see you on Saturday for the workshop.